Hello, Blue Prism customers, colleagues, and partners. If this is our first unilateral introduction, my name is Josh Noble, and I've been with the Blue Prism US sales team since spring of 2016. In that time, I've helped to start the RPA programs at over 80 new Blue Prism customers, including over 40 of the Fortune 500. If you don't already know me from my work specifically at Blue Prism, you may have also caught me over on YouTube in my Automation Insider series.
Hello, I'm actor Troy McClure. You kids might remember me from such educational films as Lead Paint, Delicious but Deadly, and Here Comes the Metric System.
So I would like to welcome you to the recording of the Cheers and Beers Happy Hour event between Blue Prism and Microsoft that was recorded on June 10th, 2021. In this session, you're dropping in on a conversation between Blue Prism and Microsoft around citizen development, Power Automate, and the pairing of Power Platform with Blue Prism to deliver solutions that are better together. In an effort to encourage open dialogue in these small, invite-only forum events, while also respecting the confidentiality of participants, there are a few small clips that are removed from the recording. Remy O'Keefe from Microsoft and John Walden from Blue Prism are moderating the event chat over on the side, so there are also a few parallel conversations which take place off-screen. The recording agenda flow should be on your screen now, and if you're watching this playback on YouTube, there'll be timestamps probably on the screen down below. However, with the mix of demos and conversation, I'd probably advise that if you're looking to run a little faster, just speed up your playhead instead of jumping over entire sections, or you're going to miss a lot of the build-up context. Bruce Curling, Blue Prism's SVP over Cloud Alliances, is going to kick everything off by covering the macro level topic of why Blue Prism and Microsoft are better together. Then I'll jump in and give you a little history lesson on a little background for automation solutions over the past decade or so, and some of the concepts that we're now seeing recycled with new industry buzzwords. If you want to learn more about that evolution topic, I really encourage you to check out the January 2016 TED Talk by Blue Prism founder Dave Moss. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, there'll be a link to that video down below. The rest of the recording is a mix of demos from Gabe Marquez from Blue Prism and my conversation with Tad Thompson from Microsoft around the topics shown on the screen. Also, from time to time, Blue Prism America's CTO John Walden will jump in to relay some of the questions that come up in the chat. So with all of that background, let's drop into the recording kicked off by Blue Prism's Bruce Curling.
All right, can everyone hear me okay? All right, perfect. Yeah, I had to use the headphones because I can't quite make it work with the microphone I have. So thanks for everybody for showing up. And as Josh mentioned, I'm just going to give a little bit of background on why we are better together and what that actually means. But in order to do so, we kind of have to go back to the very beginning of RPA, which starts about 20 years ago. So RPA came about because of a need to make disparate systems work together very quickly in a manner that was well understood by the subject matter experts who use those systems. And this was a great fit for banking because you had a banker who knew how to use many different systems, and then they could actually teach a digital worker the same way they could a human worker to work with different systems, make them all work together to accomplish a business objective. So Blue Prism did extremely well in banking and then branched out to other places, other vertical markets such as insurance related, and then into things like manufacturing, and now we're in many others. And then in that time, other things happened, such as competitors of ours showed up, but there was a thing that happened here. Even the competitors that came about, they started doing what's called attended automation. Right, meaning that the human and the digital worker are going to share a desktop, whereas we can do that too. But our strength, what we're really good at, is unattended automation. You can program a digital worker the same way you could a human, and it can work in an unattended fashion to accomplish whatever business objective you train it how to do. Now, fast forward a little bit into the future, the point where Microsoft is looking for ways to quickly integrate all of the Microsoft stack across all of the clouds, across the Azure cloud, the Dynamics cloud, the Office cloud. And what methodology does Microsoft pick to really integrate these systems quickly and make this integration available to everyone? You guessed it, RPA. And there we have Power Automate. But Power Automate works in an attended fashion. Whereas Microsoft, we always want to make sure that the Microsoft stack works together, but it's done that in an attended fashion. Whereas Blue Prism works in an unattended fashion. Blue Prism can work attended, but Blue Prism sits on a server, can sit on a server and be programmed by the people who need to get the work done to work in an unattended fashion. So where does this leave us? Well, when you combine Blue Prism in the unattended with Power Automate in the attended space, you get a full spectrum of automation that handles all the business needs and works in a way that allows the business objectives to be accomplished, either during working hours, outside of working hours, on a server, on a desktop, everything. You give the users of Microsoft the ability to have an end-to-end spectrum for all of their automation needs. And the best part about it is when you work with Power Automate and Blue Prism, you can create automations in Power Automate, run them in an unattended fashion over the weekend, completely compatible side by side. The two items work together extremely well, and we are very happy to be working with Microsoft.
Well, I will chime in first. I was trying to decide whether to throw this up in the chat or to put it in there, but I just want to make sure everybody understands that we're still working on Bruce's terminology just a little bit. Programming is more process modeling than necessarily classic programming, but the rest of his points were pretty much on point.
It figures I managed to turn my video off right at the exact wrong time. So funny for everybody, this is a little bit of a throwback. I was actually in the Microsoft community with Tad for quite a long time, and Bruce actually was with Microsoft as well. In fact, quite literally wrote a book in the Microsoft space. So I wanted to grab this off the shelf. It's a little funny. So jumping into things, Gabe, why don't I jump over to you kind of kicking off a bit of showing a demo of how Microsoft Power Platform in general and Blue Prism can work together. So let me cue that up for you, and you let me know when you want me to hit play on this and kind of narrate us through.
Sounds great. Thank you, Josh. So for this first demonstration, what I would like to do is I would like to show everyone a simple Power Automate flow that I put together that uses a couple of the built-in connectors that you probably are aware with. And also this flow will use the Blue Prism connector. And we built this connector for the Power Automate platform. So in this demo, Blue Prism will perform a very common process in the telecom space. So you will see in a minute what I'm talking about. But I think in general, this brief demo will give everyone a good idea on how these two platforms can integrate and work and complement each other. So Josh, if you can start the video, that will be great. So this simple flow is going to be triggered after receiving a request from a customer, right? As you can see in the flow, I'm using the Office 365 built-in connector. After that, the Blue Prism platform connector will kick in, and it will perform the process of unlocking a customer's cell phone. So as you know, when a customer wants to transfer ownership of a device or want to change service providers, that's what they do, right? So once the Blue Prism process is done, it will pass back to Power Automate a confirmation of this, and this is going to be posted in the Teams channel here. So let's go ahead and run this process, and let's see how we can have the whole process done from end to end. So here I have my process kicked off. The Power Automate flow checks in for an email, and then this is where the Blue Prism comes in. So what you're seeing here, this is the virtual machine where the Blue Prism process is being performed. And the Blue Prism data worker, as we call them, interacts with a CRM system, just like a human would. It launches the application, logs into it, locates the customer account, and then performs the process to unlock the phone. very fast. In a real life, users don't see this actually. It just happens in that VM sitting in the cloud or on-prem, right? So after it's done, we see that the confirmation gets posted in my Teams channel for someone to know that this process was actually performed. So it's a very brief demo, but hopefully, it gives you a good idea on how easy it is to integrate, in Power Automate flows, this type of processes done by Blue Prism. So that's what is this first demo is about, and I think I hope I conveyed the message clearly. So anytime. So Josh, if you have any questions or you want to take back the control, that's pretty much what I wanted to show you in this one.
So Gabriel, before we get off the element, there was one question. How did the actual connector that you mentioned before, is that available on the DX? Is that, how difficult was that? Give us a little bit of background for that, please.
Absolutely. This connector is available in the DX with 2,000 other, assets that we have in the DX. And yeah, the process is very simple. We have a good data sheet that guides you through the process of adding this connector into the Power Automate platform. Once you have it set up there, it's very simple. And in the next, demo that I have, I'm going to be talking a little bit about how to use it. But yes, John, yeah, it is one of the assets. It's free to download. It's something that any user can get, and it's free. It's over there. So.
And Gabe, to expand on the digital exchange out there, there's also assets for hooking together with SharePoint, with Teams specifically, with monitoring Azure runtime. So there's quite a lot of various different assets out there that you can find out on the digital exchange that are related to Blue Prism and Microsoft's broader stack hooking together, including coolest things that we usually show in a lot of these are the various different cognitive services that are available within the Microsoft stack. So if you want to take Blue Prism and add Microsoft in and create more intelligent robots, that's a really cool way to do it.
That's where you go. And yeah, the DX is basically our app store, right? And there you will find all kinds of skills to integrate with many enterprise applications. Obviously, from the Microsoft stack, we have a ton of skills that have been built. And these pre-built integrations are ready for anyone to download and start, using them in flows and in Blue Prism processes. So, yeah. So I think you're going to the next demo, Josh. I don't know if you want to go back, but anyway, so yeah, those skills we have them, and you can use them to connect to, like you were saying, use cognitive skills that would allow me in my process to perform things like NLP, natural language processing, or translation, and so forth. So anyway, is that
Gabe,
yeah.
To switch the topic from kind of the automation side of things specifically to the overarching, where we can use some broader category of those technologies, wanted to talk a little bit about Power BI here.
Absolutely. So Power BI is one of the other Microsoft technologies that we can integrate and work with, right? And in this demonstration that we're going to see next, what I wanted to do is I wanted to show you a couple of examples of dashboards that were built, they were built using Microsoft Power BI, but also the information presented here that you're going to see next is actually data that was collected by Blue Prism. So Blue Prism has, native great built-in capabilities to capture, hundreds of metrics about the Blue Prism environment, right? So this information gets presented in our own dashboards, inside of Blue Prism. Out of the box, we have a lot of them, and you can customize them the way you want it. However, we understand that not everyone might have access to the Blue Prism, environment. So then what do? So we can use Microsoft Power BI, right? And Josh, if you want to hit play the video, I can explain about this dashboard that we can build. So all the metrics that we collect in Blue Prism, we can reuse them, outside of the Blue Prism environment to create this type of dashboards, right? And if you have executives that they don't have access to Blue Prism, but they want to see these metrics, using Power BI, it's a good way to do that. So another great benefit of using Power BI is that we can aggregate data coming from different environments, even coming from across, different data sources. So the dashboard that you're seeing here, they can provide high-level overviews for those executives that they need information about your environment, but also you can drill down and get specific information about perhaps, processes that are producing a high percentage of exceptions, right? In other words, work that is not completed, complete in a satisfaction way. Or perhaps you can get information about things like, hey, you know what, I have a lot of pending work, so I need to spin up, more detail workers to complete that pending work. So the dashboard can give information about resource utilization, so you can use them to charge back those lines of business that own those processes. Or if you want to create dashboards that will support compliance, right? Like in this case, the one that you're seeing, it can show you which users are logging in into the application, the roles, the permissions, when they logged in, and things like that. So these are just a few examples of all the metrics and KPIs and things that you can create or reuse, right? And basically, it's just a subset of the data that we can gather in Blue Prism, and hopefully, with Power BI, you can build these meaningful dashboards that can help your customers to make informed decisions about their automations and about their environment in general. So,
Thanks.
yeah.
Again, critical topic on there of top down across multiple different technologies. It's not just looking at Blue Prism and Power Automate information. It's information across your BPM platforms, your infrastructure platforms, what have you, that's out there. So, Tad, yes, and we've been chatting quite a lot on this stuff. Was there anything else you wanted to mention on the Power BI side of things while we had this up before we jumped over?
Yeah, I would say also that you could embed in other pertinent information too. The beauty of Power BI is you can connect to a lot of different data sources. So if you wanted to be monitoring your processes and how the Blue Prism connector is behaving, you could also see other metrics within the organization. And that can be helpful so that a manager and executive doesn't have to click into many different reports.
Exactly.
There you go, and that's key to running this at scale, which I know we're going to get into in just a second. So, for this is probably a throwback for many of you that worked with me for the 3, 4, 5 years. It's some old Dave Moss type of stuff out there, but many of you have probably seen this concept of the long tail of automation. If we look at the evolution of where we're at for democratizing automation today, if we think 5, 6 years ago, this was kind of the paradigm out there. You had these big monolithic IT systems, and when people wanted to automate processes, business teams wanted to automate processes, they went to IT and said, hey guys, can you automate this for us? And IT said, yeah, of course we will. It'll be 18 months. And that created this problem where all of a sudden you had these business processes that had to somehow get done, hopefully quicker, and business teams were creating these kind of rogue scripts and macros out there, and that created problems all on itself. Somebody leaves the organization, doesn't know how that necessarily works. You have all sorts of automations that are going ungoverned, so that created a problem. Enter the whole enterprise RPA topic. How do we enable business teams to get involved with the creation of automation, but create something that is centrally governed, IT managed, IT approved, and not running gray IT off in a black box somewhere on somebody's computer? So we had this topic of enterprise RPA, and that reduced the need for these rogue scripts and macros. We could take them out back. Well, now jump 5, 6 years later, we still have the enterprise RPA topic, but instead of calling it scripts and macros, introduce the initial way that I think citizen developed RPA is tends to be marketed. This isn't necessarily how you do it at scale, but kind of that script and macro replacements, how we start to see that introduced and repurposing of those terms. And as we see this evolving, we see that citizen development model, that bottom up approach of creating automations, moving into supporting the enterprise initiatives, and the lines between enterprise RPA and these traditional BPM, API, SDK types of approaches of automation, those lines are blurring quite a lot over time. And so with that said, where we have this enterprise topic of kind of top-down multi-department automations and this topic of bottom-up automations, it's not fair to say that one technology fits squarely into one of those buckets. And that's important as we go through this, is keep in mind the history of some of these solutions that are out there. Blue Prism started working with some of the largest financial institutions in the world, and that was day one. And so many of the capabilities that you find in the platform and the way of thinking about it has to do with serving those types of clients first. And additional capabilities have been added over time. So you always think about Blue Prism from a server-based perspective, and most of you are probably running Blue Prism from a more top-down server-based perspective. But I personally have Blue Prism robots running RDA desktop automation on my machine right here. So it's where kind of the technology started from and where it's evolving to. As Bruce kind of alluded to at the beginning, if you think about Microsoft Flow, earlier versions of Power Automate, Win Automation, which is brought in through the Softomotive acquisition, those started originally more from a desktop bottom-up type of perspective and have evolved into more of an enterprise perspective. And that's where we come to where we're at today. So anything we say doesn't mean that's the only way it fits. It means there's a lot of kind of historical capabilities in there that have influenced how we've evolved the platforms over time. And Ted, I'll let you kind of chime in to start us off on this topic of how do we begin to handle both of these types of technologies at scale.
Well, so a lot of times we wanted to ensure that a citizen developer is working within guardrails. So one of the things we may be doing is being selective about what data and services they can connect to, so that they're not, so that they're doing what they need to do to get their processes built, but they're also not losing data. We call that data loss prevention. We want to make sure that data is not getting out of the system or in the wild. And so that's one of the things that we like to think about, kind of a governance of what the users are doing, so that they have the latitude to get some work done, but also ensuring that we're still meeting the demands of the security.
In talking about kind of the training topic, we talked a lot the last couple sessions around the importance of a COE and how that's a little bit different in many of the customers that are on today. If you think about, again, if you started thinking about it from a fully centralized model and have evolved over time, well, there's some bottlenecks to the full centralized model where everything's governed in one team, which is, you reduce risk by having plenty of oversight, but you introduce some of those things about the negatives of the speed and agility of the traditional automation approaches. But you can also be very effective on license utilization, server utilization, that type of thing, by being able to orchestrate all of that. On the flip side, if we go completely opposite to the other end of the spectrum where there's very little centralization, well, the barriers of entry are very easy. You have plenty of people raising their hands saying, wow, I can just do whatever I want. Great, we'll get into this. But you have the negatives on the risk and things that come with that. And so I find we're seeing more customers strike a balance between that, of moving from that completely locked down centralized approach to more of a federated, citizen involved type of approach over time. How are you seeing Power Automate applied in that kind of context of those two extremes?
Yeah, one of the things that I see is kind of almost like modular or like pods, where you might have sure, you'll have this central control to a certain extent, and then you'll have groups that are, they're maybe logically grouped around division or projects, and you might have one or two real core SMEs, subject matter experts or technical experts, that can then help their little group of citizen developers, so that you still have some level of kind of professional development in a way. I'm not talking about coding, but just to kind of keep that good structure of DevOps, but yet you're still kind of spreading it out throughout the organization. So that's one method that I'm seeing that helps do it well, but also keep some control while still letting the citizen developers do what they need to do.
And Tad, when you say the term citizen development, I'll share mine in a second, but when you think about a citizen developer, what does that mean to you? Because that means a lot of different things depending on what marketing.
Sure. Yeah. What I would call it is those they're probably power users, a little technical. But they're not writing code. However, they're probably having to do some functions. So like if you're comfortable in Excel and creating functions there, the learning curve on a lot of these technologies is much easier, because you are going to have to do some functions. It's unlikely that you could work through a template and you could get things going pretty quickly, but you'll pretty soon hit requirements that require a little bit. So I would say low code, insofar as some kind of function. It depends, like Gabe showed Power BI. Well, Power BI has some of that too, with the writing of DAX expressions, for instance. So I think we're kind of working toward more and more technologies that have that low code concept, so that we can help meet this app gap, you might say, where the demand for apps and not enough developers.
So there's
what are your thoughts on citizen dev?
Yeah, there's still an engineering mindset that goes into it. There's training that goes into it. It's not just we give the software to everybody and everybody can automatically auto-magically start automating processes. There is some education, and that's critical to the next topic of the reuse component, but it's critical to all this as well. Is we want people to be educated on how to do this in a strong, kind of IT foundational IT background way. We don't need to teach them JSON and C# and .NET and
right.
have you, but we need to teach them a lot of those design concepts that come in when you have a historical IT background. And that's how I put the citizen developer area.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's an interesting paradigm as well, because a lot of folks, when they hear citizen development, merge two topics together. Often it's citizen development is also desktop automation, which is not the case at all. How you build an automation, who builds an automation, and where that automation runs are two completely different topics from each other. Now, you and I have clearly chatted about, for people who are training, learning, getting access to software and figuring this out, of course, you don't want to have to necessarily set up servers for all those folks. But when you run this in production, that changes a little bit. So when you see Power Automate running, is it more on the desktop side of things as this is evolving over time, or is it more on the server side of things, or what are you seeing in your observation?
Yeah, I think it markets to we tend to market it to the end consumer, that we can take over their rudimentary or repeatable processes. And I think that's a great way actually to learn it and begin to understand it. I think as you scale to an enterprise, that's probably not the reality of it. I mean, if I'm working on my workstation, I don't want it to suddenly be doing things unless I know I'm going to be walking away. But there is still an element of learning the tool, like the recorder concept, that you can start to get the understanding of how it functions and how it then could be applied, and then you gradually work your way to more robust methods.
Well, the kind of hijacking machine is a big one that you mentioned. It's great to learn how to, for example, automating expense reports when I was flying 100,000 miles a year. Concur would just start stacking up with expense reports. So my wife would chime in on the weekends and help me do those. Now, if I help her do my expense reports, I really don't want her to come over to my computer and start hijacking my keyboard and pushing me out of the way. That'd be a super awkward way to do this. But I bet you a lot of employees at a company would love to have automation help them with expenses, but that's fairly standard across all employees. So instead, we shift that automation over to more of a server-based thing. And that doesn't mean that citizen developers can't be involved with that. Have individuals that are educated in this across the business contributing to those elements, contributing to those automations, and aggregate them together in some level of central way.
Josh, I think the point that you're making is an excellent point, because this really brings to bear the fact that people know the work that needs to be accomplished. And if they know those systems of record better than, maybe a center of excellence or anything of that sort, they can contribute those parts and pieces that then can help not only them, but then other people within the bounds of their organization as they look at more things to automate far more quickly. It's that classic that we talk about, the Lego orientation, having the pieces that are pre-molded and available. All right, you're smiling and pointing. I'll shut up. Go ahead.
Segue.
You had no idea what I was about to bring up. So, on the topic of Legos, you might have actually seen a couple things down there. So we were joking about this, and I think that's actually a perfect analogy to it. So, we all inherently think of Legos like this, these little blocks with, round pegs and, circle bottoms to them. But you learn that, you pick that up somehow over the years, that this is what a Lego is supposed to look like. And if we were to create a Lego, it's probably inherently going to look like this: circle pegs, circle holes on there. And there's a standard design that goes into that. But if nobody educated you on that, if that wasn't standardized practice that was kind of ingrained in you from a visceral perspective, you'd have citizen developers start creating things that look like this: triangle Lego blocks and Pentagon Lego blocks that don't fit together, aren't reusable across the organization. Or heck, if you don't go through some central design, you get circle bottoms and nothing on the top. So and if you think about where that comes into play, if we don't have that standardization across the organization, how are we ever going to be able to scale this out? And that becomes, in my point of view, a really central core critical role of a center of excellence, is the establishment of those design practices. We're all going to build things in this way. Here's some templates we're going to use. Here's how we load work queues, get information in and out. And here's how things are supposed to look and feel. And then also, when we get into, and you'll see it in a second here from a demo perspective, establishing that library of Lego blocks and putting those out there so that everybody can reuse those components is big. I don't need 40 different people building the same hook, the same connector, the same object for the exact same system. Build it once, centralize it, harden it, make sure it works across the organization, and then provide those pieces out there so our business teams can focus on doing what they do best. So Gabe, we'll go back to a little demo thing here for you. Actually, Tad, if anything you wanted to chime in before we pulled up the demo?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Tad, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was saying go ahead.
All right, sounds good. So yeah, absolutely, Josh. And hopefully in this last demonstration, everyone can see how easy it is to reuse these building blocks that are bulletproof, that have been developed by people that have made them resilient and scalable, right? That you can take them and make sure that your automations are gonna perform the way they should be, right? So I like to just show you this brief demo that hopefully can give you a clear idea on how we can do this in both platforms, right? Power Automate as well as in Blue Prism. So as a lot of people probably know, already, Power Automate provides like more than 400 built-in platform connectors that can be used and reused pretty much in any flow that you can think of, right? And here in the example, you're seeing just a couple of them, like the Outlook or the Excel connector. But also, you can reuse the platform connector that we talk about in the same fashion, right? You can set it up and configure it very similarly that the way you do that you use one of the other connectors in the platform. And as you saw in the previous demo, we can integrate with applications that, number one, we might not have a connector already built in the Power Platform, or of course, when you're in a demo, then anything can happen, right? Sorry about that. So, all right. So the other thing is we can integrate with applications that we might not have a connector, or that application that might not have an API. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry this is happening, but I'm sure everyone can relate to working from home. So just give me a sec, okay?
Oh, good. Yeah. John, good timing. Are there any questions in the chat? I'm sure we probably stacked a few of them in there that you might have seen, or Bruce or Remy.
We actually have been doing pretty well keeping up with them. We have had a few questions about things that have led to questions and discussions around the robotic operating model and its importance. But I think it was very entertaining that I was able to be your straight man so that you could show your printer skills that go on.
It's my 35th birthday today, and I'm apparently still a 12-year-old on the inside. So works out well for the kids. So on the note of reusable components, so Gabe mentioned that out of the box in Power Automate, there's 400, almost 500 reusable connectors that are called in Power Automate today. Tad, you kind of had something funny you'd mentioned about the association between them and the Legos yesterday when we were.
Yeah, so yes, we've got a lot of connectors out of the box. I would say that if you want to create a custom connector, you can. Usually it's going to require some dev skills. So sometimes that can be a bit of a roadblock. Yeah, I had the analogy of my grandkids get the Legos in the boxes where they're pre-built. It's like they want to build like the Millennium Falcon or something, and they have all the instructions and it works great. But if you wanted to just build anything, something you see or you know personally, then you have to go to you get the big bucket of 5,000 Legos. And then you need to build that yourself. So maybe there's a little bit of a learning curve to learn how to build those, but then the kind of the sky's the limit as far as building them all. Whereas if you've got kind of the instructions, that's all that little Lego will do is build your Millennium Falcon. It's not going to do other custom stuff for you.
And kind of jumping ahead, and Gabe, we'll go back to you in a second
I'm back, Josh. Sorry about that.
All good. So in that jumps us ahead to one of the big comparison differences between a Blue Prism and a Power Automate is you do have those 400 to 500 reusable components that are pre-built there. Blue Prism ships with far fewer out of the box from the Blue Prism dev team. That's, you call it the support team in Austin, and they support those. Now there's tons out on the digital exchange. Those aren't all necessarily supported in the same way, but that's where the learning curve becomes very different. I'd say with Power Automate, I can pick it up very, very quickly, and I can build something with very minimal kind of training involved with that. And you go along and you hit kind of a certain point, and all of a sudden the skill set goes kind of way up and goes over. Whereas a Blue Prism, the starting point is a bit higher because it doesn't have all of that necessarily IntelliSense that's built in. It doesn't have all those reusable bits right there, but the learning curve never kind of takes that just immediate sharp curve up until you get fairly late in the game doing some weird kind of not standard things. So, Cool. So Gabe, I've got your demo up.
Yeah.
Back to you.
All right. Sorry about that. The joys of working from home, right? I'm home alone, two dogs, and then they start barking at the same time. So good thing. Anyway, sorry about that. So what I would like to do is I'd like to show you how we can reuse components and objects in both platforms. So what I'm going to do is let's kick off the video. And what I would like to describe here is what's going on. So in order to reuse components, right? In this case, the Blue Prism connector that we've been talking about is very, very simple. So once you set it up, you have it in your list of connectors available, and you set it up very easily, like, you know, if you were filling a form. So once this is set up, it's going to show me, you know, what are the processes that I can reuse or kick off. And then if that process needs a specific input, then I just set it up in the same fashion that I do it in Power Automate. Now, here what you're seeing is the Blue Prism Studio. This is where I create my flows and processes. And again, if I wanted to add, you know, an action to my flow, and now I want to integrate with, let's say, with Salesforce, this is what I would do. I just select from the list of reusable objects. Once I select my object, I define the action that I want to perform. And then, you know, I just link it to with the rest of my flow. So I don't have to write any code. I don't have to do any coding at all. So if I wanted to go back with information to a Power Automate flow, I just do the same. I just drag and drop my action. I configure the specific, you know, well, I select the object that I want to use in my flow, and then I just set it up with the appropriate inputs and outputs, and that's it. That's all it takes to start using, you know, this type of reusable building blocks that were created once and that I can use in any process that I think I can use that functionality. So hopefully this short video gave you a good idea of how I can do this in both platforms, right? In the Power Automate, in the Blue Prism, and how I can start using processes and flows in both platforms, right? So that's pretty much what I wanted to show you here in this brief demo. I hope it was clear after all this thing with the docs. Right, back to you, Josh.
Appreciate it, Gabe. Again, we covered a little bit of the design differences, but we're going to go through the last kind of 3 points on here is a little bit of the differences between Blue Prism and Power Automate. John, I'll key it over to you one last time before we jump into this for any QA that's come up through the chat on that.
Nope. Actually, one just came in with regards to, you know, whether or not maybe Gabe, this is an answer. We'll go back to you, but the VBO that was just being shown, the item that was being used to call and pull from and to Power Automate, is that a specific VBO? As we said earlier, it's just one that's on the DX. When it gets pulled down, will it require, you know, a great deal of skill to be able to activate that? Can you give us a little bit of background on that one?
Yeah, so this is a web API that you can create inside of Blue Prism, right? And after you can create this web API, you can configure the actions that you can or want to perform. So it's very similar to when you're building, you know, another web API call to any other services. Think about, like, for instance, in the case of if I wanted to add a call or a web API call to cognitive service, well, I can set it up in Blue Prism as well. The benefit of using the web APIs or the skills that I have already in Blue Prism is that I don't have to spend the time to do that. So that's one of the benefits of the Blue Prism Digital Exchange, that users will contribute building these Legos. Blue Prism will make sure that they are ready for an enterprise, you know, production, and so on. In this case, it was just something that we built for this demo, but absolutely anybody can start building those. If you have a little bit more expertise on how to use or call web APIs, then you can build them in our environment.
And as you said, that particular one is available on the digital exchange. So while it may be custom, it is available for other people to leverage.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
One kind of pro tip on the digital exchange: if you're a large organization using assets from the Blue Prism Digital Exchange, I mentioned there's over 2,000 on there today. They're growing like crazy. It can be a little cumbersome to filter through all of that, just like kind of an app store type of thing. You can request and set up a private version of the digital exchange to be able to flag assets that are kind of supported and approved to bring attention to that within your organization. You also can use that as a repository to upload your own reusable elements, particularly, again, useful when we get into the citizen development topic to bring focus to the things that matter to your organization. So let us know if you want help setting that up. We can do that for you. That's available for everybody at no cost. So have we talked already a little bit about the design? Well, a lot about the design differences between a Power Automate and Blue Prism. But coming back to kind of the historic aspect of things, we get to where the solutions were built originally, and that influences where they're at today. So, for example, Power Automate has always had a record and replay function very center to the platform. And when we think about citizen development, that's a really hot topic, as you might imagine. Blue Prism historically has not had a record and replay functionality. Now, with the introduction of Blue Prism Capture 6 months or so ago, Capture was originally designed for basically recording processes for documentation purposes, and now can use that to build out the skeletons of processes and objects, and that functionality is expanding over time. But passing over to you, Tad, where you see record and replay functionality, because you've had it for many, many years, where do you see that applied within an organization? I mean, where does that become helpful for somebody, getting into this automation?
Yeah, I think it works well for an initial attempts at using it. It plays well, it demos well. People can kind of easily understand that if they do this and this and this and this, and it's recording that, and then you sit back and you watch it happen. Now, there are a couple of considerations with that. It tends to pick up a lot of white noise. I mean, you think about what you do at your desktop or laptop. You might use keyboards, you might use your mouse, you click, and then you right click, and then you tab, and so that recording might have a lot of extraneous things in it. And so it's not necessarily the optimal way. I mean, yes, it's good for learning and for kind of just getting an understanding of it. I think in the long term, you probably want to go through the process advisor instead, so that it's helping you clean that up. I mean, you can manually clean it up too, but that's usually what I see, is that it's kind of a beginning step, but then after that, you'll probably want to do it a little more cleanly.
And we're seeing the same thing with Capture. You turn it on, and now it's more, you have to train people on what to get rid of and what to trim down to, because it just gets so much in, and they don't necessarily always take into account a lot of variables. So, for example, you record a process touching SharePoint on Sunday afternoon, and then it's Wednesday when a few people happen to be actually on the system. Latency is a little bit different on their performance, a little bit different. Those are things, if you're doing anything at scale, you have to take some of those design considerations into approach. So it's a merger of those. It's not a cheat tool that all of a sudden makes it super automatic for everything to be automatically recorded. If we get into the design, the control aspect of things, and we talked a little bit about this from a Power BI perspective, Blue Prism does have a native interactive client that everybody it will have used because it's the first thing you see when you log into Blue Prism. We have recently added web-based dashboarding types of capability and scheduling capability between Blue Prism Hub and now with Blue Prism version 7. There's a lot more of that that's easily accessible without necessarily the interactive client. And I think a lot of folks on here are probably very familiar with that because I'm seeing tons of Blue Prism customers on here. Could you talk about a little bit about the control and command capabilities in Power Automate?
So around like the control of what you're allowing users to do, is that what you mean? Or
yeah, because I think if certain folks are under the impression that this is a personal automation tool, which is not necessarily anymore, but then you think about, okay, now how would I manage that at some level of scale? What can exist in the platform today to help with that?
Yeah, so we can dictate which connectors or controls that any group of users might use, and then also within environments, you might allow different behavior in, say, a development environment versus production or test and UAT, whatever you call it. We can also categorize, and this can be helpful where you might say business data versus non-business data. So, you might have a process that listens to Twitter. Well, that's probably considered non-business data. Whereas if you're looking at, SAP or some other financial data, that's definitely going to be considered business data. And so you might have a different set of controls based on how that data is used within the organization or not used within the organization. And then you might even categorize it further, whether it's confidential or not confidential, whether you can export it out into something like Excel or not.
Yeah, and we were talking a lot about that the last couple of days on the centralized governance and control. Blue Prism has a multi-team environment functionality that's role-based access control. You guys have I like the business data, not business data classification. Again, that gets into kind of the heritage of
Sure.
Use it in that way. The last thing I want to cover, and because I'm holding everybody from the fun beer side of things, is the licensing is very, very different. And I don't mean to turn this into a commercial conversation, but thinking about how you license the technologies influences a lot of decisions up front. So, for example, Blue Prism has one license model as far as the normal kind of Blue Prism Enterprise capability. You license a digital worker that is a multi-purpose resource. It can, first thing Monday morning, do IT password reset processes when everybody forgot their passwords from having too many beers over the weekend. It could jump 20 minutes later to doing HR processes, and 5 minutes after that, it could do financial close procedures. So it can jump between a lot of different things, and that one license, that one runtime resource, that bot can jump between all of those. And that's a good thing from a flexibility perspective, but then there's a cost associated with that kind of all working resource. Ted, you want to kind of explain the model on Power Automate licensing options, because there's a lot of them that are
yeah, and it can get a little confusing sometimes. So you can do it either on a per user basis or per flows, meaning the number of processes. So if you knew that any one user or group of users are going to be doing lots and lots and lots of processes, then you might license it on that more kind of unlimited scale. Or you might say, well, we're just going to allow each user to have like 5 processes and that's it. So, but you'll have to consider that. You'll have to do some planning around that and make sure that you're getting the best option.
Yeah, and that upfront planning is a key consideration across this. So with that, I know we came right at the end of the hour. One of the biggest takeaways I want you to get from this is that we didn't get deep into all the technical nuances of this. if you want to find out more, let us know. And most importantly, we're here to help you together. You don't necessarily have to have siloed conversations. This is not a Blue Prism versus Microsoft type of thing. There will be areas that there are overlap where you'll use, kind of a toss up between solutions, but I think there's natural fits for each technology out there. So unlike kind of a lot of automation solutions you can find out there, this is one where we can approach this together to help you together. So let us know. We'd love to be involved with the conversation, and contact information is on the screen. So with that, we'll stay on. We'll answer questions in the chat, but don't want to hold anybody out from the rest of the beer time here.